The evening sky was turning darker as the young woman drove down the long country road. She had been traveling for hours, tired but determined to reach home before night fully fell. The road was quiet, with tall trees leaning from both sides, their branches swaying in the cool wind. She hummed softly to herself, trying to keep her mind awake, when suddenly the car gave a strange jerk. At first, she thought it was nothing, maybe just the uneven road. But within seconds the engine coughed, the lights flickered, and the vehicle came to a slow stop. Her heart sank. She tried turning the key again and again, but the car refused to start. The silence around her felt heavier now, and she looked at her phone for help. To her surprise, there was no signal. She held the phone up high, even stepped out onto the gravel road, but still nothing. The wind carried only the sound of crickets and distant rustling leaves. For the first time that day, she felt nervous. Looking around, she realized the area was almost deserted. No cars passed by. The road stretched endlessly in both directions, and the thought of being stuck there alone frightened her. She locked her car, pulled her coat tighter around herself, and started walking. She hoped she might find a gas station, a house, anything. Every step seemed louder than it should, crunching against the gravel in the silence of the countryside. After what felt like forever, a faint light appeared in the distance. It wasn't a street light. It looked like the warm glow of a lamp from a window. Her heart lifted. She quickened her pace, praying someone was there who could help. As she got closer, she saw it clearly, an old farmhouse standing tall, a wooden fence around it, with a large barn sitting just behind. The house looked aged but alive, its windows glowing like a promise of safety. She paused for a moment, clutching her bag tightly, unsure whether to approach. What if no one was home? What if the people weren't kind? But then she thought of the cold wind, the broken car, and the lonely road, and she gathered courage. Slowly, she walked through the wooden gate and made her way to the front porch. The wood creaked under her shoes as she knocked on the door. At first, there was silence. She waited, her breath forming small clouds in the cool air. Then, the sound of footsteps echoed from inside. The door opened, and an older farmer stood there. His face was calm but unreadable, his hands rough from years of work. He wore simple clothes, and his eyes studied her carefully, as though weighing whether she was a stranger to be trusted. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said softly, her voice shaking a little. "My car broke down on the road, and I don't have any phone signal. I didn't know where else to go." The farmer remained quiet for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Road out here can be tricky," he replied in a steady voice. "You're lucky you found the house." She felt a bit of relief at his words. He opened the door wider and motioned for her to step in. Inside, the farmhouse was warm, lit with soft golden light from an old lamp. The air smelled faintly of wood and earth, and though simple, the place felt safe. The farmer offered her a chair and disappeared for a moment before returning with a glass of water. She thanked him quickly and took a sip, realizing only then how dry her throat had become from walking. "I can take a look at your car in the morning," he said after a pause. "It's too dark now, and the road isn't safe at night. You can rest here until then." She nodded, grateful, but her eyes wandered to the barn outside the window. It stood tall and shadowed, with its wooden doors closed tightly. Just as she looked, she noticed the farmer's eyes following her gaze. Without saying anything, he pulled the curtains shut. Something about the way he did, it made her curious. Why had he been so quick to cover it? What was inside? She pushed the thought aside, telling herself it was just a barn farmer's kept tools, animals, maybe hay inside. Still, a small feeling of mystery began to grow in her chest. The farmer sat across from her, calm but distant. They spoke only a little. He asked where she was coming from and where she was headed, and she answered simply, still feeling the weight of the long day. He didn't share much about himself. His voice was kind but carried a quietness that made her wonder what kind of life he lived out here, far from the city lights. She glanced once more toward the window, but the curtain stayed closed. The barn was hidden now, only its outline faintly visible against the night sky. For a brief moment, she thought she heard something, a faint sound, like a murmur or movement, but perhaps it was her tired mind playing tricks. When the farmer offered her a blanket to rest in the corner chair, she accepted. She wrapped herself in the warmth, but as she leaned back, her thoughts kept returning to the barn. Why had she felt such unease when looking at it? Why did it feel like more than just wood and hay inside? The farmhouse grew quieter. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, brushing against the old walls. The woman closed her eyes, though her mind stayed restless. The car was broken, the road was empty, and she was in the house of a stranger whose barn seemed to hide something. She didn't know it yet, but this night would change her life in ways she never imagined. The morning light slipped through the cracks of the old farmhouse window, soft and golden. The young woman slowly opened her eyes, feeling the stiffness in her neck from sleeping in the chair. For a moment, she forgot where she was, until the faint smell of fresh bread and the quiet sounds of movement reminded her. She sat up quickly, adjusting the blanket the farmer had given her the night before. The farmhouse looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more ordinary, with shelves full of jars, old wooden furniture, and a kettle steaming on the stove. The farmer entered the room, carrying a tray with bread and tea. His face was as calm as before, unreadable yet strangely comforting. He set the tray down on the table and nodded toward her. "You must be hungry," he said simply. She offered a small smile. "Thank you. I didn't mean to trouble you. I was lucky to find your house last night." He only gave a short nod, not saying much else. As she took a bite of the bread, warm and soft, she glanced out the window again. The barn stood there, just as it had the night before, its doors closed, its wooden frame worn but strong. In the morning light, it seemed less frightening, but still, something about it held her attention. She remembered the way he had pulled the curtains shut so quickly when she looked at it. She also remembered the faint sounds she thought she heard in the night. Trying to push her curiosity aside, she decided to ask about her car. "Do you think it's fixable?" she asked carefully. The farmer sat down across from her, sipping his tea before answering. "I'll take a look after breakfast. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes not. Either way, you'll be on your way soon enough." She nodded, feeling a mix of relief and unease. He was kind, yes, but still so guarded. His answers were short, his eyes hard to read. It was as if he carried a weight she couldn't see. After breakfast, they walked out together toward the road where her car was parked. The gravel crunched under their shoes, and the morning breeze carried the smell of earth and grass. She followed closely behind him, her eyes drifting again toward the barn as they passed. She noticed a heavy lock on the doors, newer than the rest of the structure, almost too new compared to the old wood. She wondered why a farmer needed such a strong lock for a barn. They reached her car, and he opened the hood, checking carefully. She stood nearby, watching as he leaned over the engine with practiced hands. "Looks like something small," he muttered, almost to himself. "Might take some hours, but I can get it running." Relief washed over her. Though part of her felt trapped hours, more meant staying on the farm longer. Staying close to that locked barn that stirred her curiosity. She thanked him again and walked back to the farmhouse while he worked. Inside, she wandered around the living room, noticing the small details. On a shelf stood a few old photographs, faded and yellowed. One showed a younger version of the farmer with a group of people she didn't recognize. Another was of the farmhouse itself, standing proud many years ago. But there were no photos of a family, no children, no wife. The house felt lived in, yet strangely lonely. The day stretched on slowly. The farmer came back inside from time to time, his hands covered in grease, his face serious as he worked on her car. Each time, she caught herself staring out toward the barn. In the bright sunlight, she thought she saw movement at the small window near the top. It was faint, quick, and she told herself it might have been nothing but a trick of light. Still, it made her heart race. When the farmer stepped inside again to wash his hands, she tried to sound casual. "You have a big barn out there," she said lightly. "Do you keep animals?" For the first time, his calm face seemed to tighten. He looked at her for a long second before replying. "Tools, supplies, farm things," he said shortly, then turned back to the sink. His answer was simple, but his tone closed the subject completely. She nodded, pretending not to notice, but inside her curiosity only grew stronger. Why would he react that way to such an ordinary question? Why did it seem like he was hiding something? As the sun began to set, the farmer told her the car was nearly ready, but would still need more time. He offered her another meal, simple soup and bread, and then suggested she rest again. Grateful but restless, she accepted. Later that night, as the farmhouse grew quiet once more, she lay awake on the chair, the blanket pulled up to her chin. The silence was deep, but not complete. From outside, carried softly on the wind, came the sound again, low murmurs, like voices. She sat up, her heart pounding. She walked quietly to the window and pulled the curtain back just a little. The barn stood in darkness, except for a faint glow of light peeking from a crack between the doors. Her breath caught in her throat. She strained to listen, and yes, there it was again, voices, not loud, but real. Her hands trembled as she let the curtain fall back into place. What could be inside that barn? Why was the farmer hiding it? Fear and curiosity battled inside her chest, and she realized she was no longer just waiting for her car to be fixed. She was waiting to uncover the secret that barn held. The night stretched on endlessly, and the young woman could not close her eyes. Every time she tried, her mind pulled her back to the faint glow she had seen from the barn. She told herself it could be a lantern left behind, or maybe animals making sounds, but the voices she thought she heard refused to leave her thoughts. Curiosity burned stronger than sleep, and she found herself listening to every creak of the old farmhouse, every brush of wind against the wooden walls. When the clock ticked past midnight, she heard it again, soft footsteps on the porch. She rose slowly, careful not to make a sound, and moved toward the window. Through a small crack in the curtain, she saw the farmer walking across the yard. In one hand he carried a lantern, its light swinging gently with each step. His figure moved steadily toward the barn. Her heart pounded. So she hadn't imagined it. There really was something happening inside. She pressed closer to the window, hardly daring to breathe, and watched as he unlocked the heavy padlock and slipped inside. The door closed behind him, but not before she caught another glimpse of that strange warm glow from within. For a long moment, she stood frozen, torn between fear and curiosity. Should she follow? What if she discovered something dangerous? What if he caught her? But the thought of not knowing, of leaving in the morning with this mystery unanswered, made her restless. She paced the small room, biting her lip. The farmhouse felt too quiet without him inside. She tried to convince herself to stay put, but her feet betrayed her thoughts. Before long, she had slipped on her shoes, wrapped herself in the blanket like a shawl, and crept silently toward the door. The night air was cold and sharp, filling her lungs as she stepped outside. The yard was dimly lit by the lantern's faint glow leaking through cracks in the barn. Crickets sang in the fields, and the moon hung low, casting a pale silver light over everything. Each step she took toward the barn made her chest tighten. She felt exposed, like the whole world could hear the sound of her heartbeat. She moved closer, pressing herself against the barn's rough wooden wall. Her fingers brushed against the wood as she tried to steady herself. From inside, the voices grew clearer, soft, overlapping, like people speaking in hushed tones. But they weren't angry or threatening. They almost sounded Gentle dot, she found a small gap in the wood, wide enough to peek through. Slowly she leaned in, her eyes straining to adjust to the light inside. At first, she couldn't make sense of what she saw. There were figures, several of them, sitting close together. The farmer was among them, his lantern resting on a crate. He was speaking softly, his face kinder and warmer than she had seen before. Around him sat people young and old, listening closely. Her breath caught in her throat. They weren't workers, and they weren't neighbors stopping by late. These people looked tired, their clothes worn, their eyes heavy with worry but lit with gratitude. One child leaned against the farmer's shoulder, clutching a small piece of bread. A woman nearby held a baby wrapped in an old blanket. The young woman blinked, trying to understand. Why were these people here? Why were they hiding in his barn? She leaned closer, but the wood groaned softly under her weight. She quickly pulled back, holding her breath. Inside, no one seemed to notice that her mind raced with questions. Was he keeping them there against their will? Or was he protecting them? The barn didn't look like a prison. It looked more like a refuge. There were blankets spread across the floor, baskets of food stacked in the corner, and even a small fire burning safely in a metal drum to keep the chill away. She felt torn between fear and awe. This wasn't what she expected at all. The farmer, who seemed so quiet and guarded, was here, speaking kindly, sharing food, offering comfort to people who clearly had nowhere else to go. Suddenly, a small sound escaped her lips, a sharp gasp she hadn't meant to make. She covered her mouth quickly, pressing herself flat against the wall. Her whole body went still, her ears straining for any sign that someone had heard. Inside, the farmer paused, his head lifting slightly, his eyes narrowing toward the door. The barn went quiet for a long moment. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure it would give her away. She prayed silently that he wouldn't come out, that he wouldn't find her standing there like an intruder. After a few tense moments, the farmer spoke again, his voice calm but firmer now. "We must stay quiet. It's late. Tomorrow will bring more answers." The others nodded, and the soft conversations resumed. The young woman let out a shaky breath, relieved. She crept back from the barn, careful not to make another sound, and hurried across the yard toward the farmhouse. Once inside, she leaned against the door, her chest heaving. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. All night, she had imagined the barn held something dark, maybe even dangerous. But instead, it held something unexpected, people who looked like they needed help. People who had found shelter in the farmer's secret care. She returned to the chair and sat down, her blanket clutched tightly around her. Sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed the images over and over, the farmer's gentle voice, the child with bread, the tired woman cradling her baby. Who were they? Why were they here? And why was the farmer hiding them from the world? By the time dawn touched the sky with pale light, her decision was clear. She couldn't leave without answers. She had to know the truth. The barn no longer scared her, it pulled her in with a force she couldn't resist. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the cracks in the farmhouse window, but the young woman had hardly slept. She sat upright, staring at the curtains, her thoughts circling endlessly around what she had witnessed the night before. The barn no longer felt like a place of mystery and fear. It felt like a place that held a story she was meant to uncover. When the farmer entered the room that morning, his expression was the same as always, calm, reserved, almost unreadable. He set a cup of tea on the table for her without a word. She thanked him quietly, but her eyes lingered on him longer than before. She wanted to ask directly, to demand the truth about the barn, but the words caught in her throat. Something about his guarded nature made her hesitate. After breakfast, he stepped outside to check her car again. She followed him, her eyes drifting once more toward the barn. In daylight, she noticed things she hadn't before: footprints in the dirt leading to and from the doors, scraps of fabric caught on the wood, and faint smoke curling from a tiny opening near the roof. None of these belonged to animals or farm tools. They belonged to people. The farmer wiped his hands on a cloth and gave her a small nod. "Your car's almost ready," he said, avoiding her eyes. She opened her mouth to thank him, but instead the words tumbled out. "I saw them." He froze, his back stiffening. For a long moment he didn't move, then slowly turned toward her. His face was calm, but his eyes carried something heavier, now something between worry and weariness. "What did you see?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard. "Last night, I couldn't sleep. I saw you go to the barn. I saw the people inside. The children, the families." Her voice softened. "You don't have to hide it from me." The silence between them stretched. Finally, the farmer let out a long sigh, his shoulders sinking as though the weight of his secret was too heavy to carry any longer. He looked at her with tired eyes, then gestured toward the barn. "Come," he said simply. Her heart raced as she followed him. The air felt thicker, charged with anticipation. When they reached the barn, he unlocked the heavy padlock with steady hands and pushed the doors open. Inside, the sight made her breath catch. In the soft morning light filtering through the cracks, she saw them clearly, now men, women, and children huddled together on makeshift beds of hay and blankets. Some were sitting quietly, others were tending to small fires for warmth, and a few children played with scraps of wood as if they were toys. Every face turned toward the door when it opened, eyes wide with fear at first. But when they saw the farmer, their expressions softened. Some even managed small smiles, like they trusted him completely. The young woman stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning the scene. It was nothing like what she had expected. No danger, no crime. Only people who looked tired, fragile, and in desperate need of safety. The farmer closed the doors behind them and stood quietly by her side. "They have nowhere else to go," he said softly. "Some lost their homes. Some ran from things they couldn't face. The world has no place for them, but I couldn't turn them away." She turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "You've been hiding them here?" He nodded. "For years now. I give them food when I can. Shelter when the nights get cold. It isn't much, but it's all I have to offer." His eyes grew distant. "The townsfolk wouldn't understand. They'd call it dangerous. They'd call it foolish. So I keep it secret." The young woman's chest ached as she looked around the barn. A little boy clutched a crust of bread like it was a treasure. A mother rocked her baby, humming softly to keep it calm. An older man with weary eyes sat against the wall, nodding gratefully toward the farmer. Every person here carried a story she couldn't yet know, but each one was written on their faces. She stepped closer to one of the children, offering a gentle smile. The little girl hesitated, but then smiled back shyly, holding out a small flower she had plucked from the dirt. The woman accepted it, her eyes stinging with emotion. Turning back to the farmer, she whispered, "You've been carrying this alone all this time?" His voice was steady, though filled with quiet pain. "Some burdens are easier carried in silence. If people knew, they'd force me to stop. And then where would these souls go? At least here, they have something. At least here, they're safe." The woman felt her throat tighten. The mystery that had kept her awake, the unease she had carried, melted into something else entirely: admiration, sorrow, and respect all at once. This wasn't the secret of a man hiding something shameful. It was the secret of a man protecting lives in the only way he knew how. She looked around once more, taking in every detail: the rough blankets, the simple meals, the warmth of strangers huddled together, and she realized she could never leave this place unchanged. When they stepped back outside, the sun was climbing higher in the sky. The farmer closed the doors and locked them again, his face once more guarded, but his eyes softer now. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said quietly. "But maybe it was meant to be." The woman nodded slowly, her voice trembling with conviction. "You can't keep doing this alone. Let me help." For the first time since she met him, she saw the faintest trace of a smile on his weathered face. The air outside the barn felt different now. The young woman stood quietly beside the farmer, the morning sun washing the fields in gold, her heart still heavy from what she had seen inside. For so long, she had wondered about the locked doors, the strange noises, the guarded looks. Now the truth was out, and it was more powerful than she could have imagined. She looked at the farmer, his face lined with years of work and worry. He had carried this secret, sheltered these lives, and asked for nothing in return. The world saw him as just a quiet man living on a lonely farm, but she now knew he was something much greater. Her voice broke the silence. "You can't carry this burden alone anymore. You've done so much already, but these people need more than you can give. I want to help." The farmer studied her carefully, as though weighing her words. He had heard promises before, empty ones from strangers or officials who turned their backs. But there was something in her tone, something steady and genuine, that made him pause. He gave a small nod, but his eyes showed both relief and hesitation. "If you do this, you can't speak carelessly. The wrong word to the wrong person, and everything falls apart." "I understand," she replied. "But I won't walk away. Not now." The day passed slowly, but for the first time since her car had broken down, she didn't feel restless or trapped. She felt a sense of purpose. She helped prepare meals in the farmhouse kitchen, carrying baskets of bread and fruit to the barn when no one was watching. The children inside warmed to her quickly. One little boy tugged at her sleeve, showing her a toy he had carved out of wood. Another girl laughed as she braided the child's tangled hair. The mothers thanked her with tired smiles, their eyes glistening with gratitude. Even the older men, who seemed hardened by years of struggle, softened in her presence. It was as if her arrival had brought not only extra hands, but also new hope. That evening, when the farmer checked her car one final time, he returned with good news. "It'll run now," he said, wiping the grease from his hands. "You'll be able to leave tomorrow." The words should have filled her with relief, but instead, her heart sank. Leave? How could she walk away from this place now, knowing what she knew? She looked at the barn, where faint laughter rose into the cool air, and felt a pull stronger than any road or destination. That night, as they sat quietly by the stove, she spoke again. "You've built a safe haven here, but it shouldn't end with you. These people need more. Supplies, clothes, medicine. They need someone to speak for them, someone who can bring help without bringing trouble. Let me be that person." The farmer didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames, his face lit by the flickering glow. Finally, he said softly, "You remind me of someone I once knew. Someone who believed the world could be kinder. Maybe it's time I stopped carrying this alone." Her chest tightened with emotion. In that moment, she realized she had stumbled into this place for a reason. A broken car had led her here, but destiny had given her a chance to change lives. The next morning, she loaded her things into her car, the engine humming back to life. But before she left, she walked once more to the barn. The children waved shyly, the mothers offered quiet blessings, and the farmer stood at the doorway, watching silently. "I'll be back," she told him firmly. "And I won't come empty-handed." He gave her a small nod, his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. Then maybe there's hope after all. Weeks later, true to her word, she returned. This time she brought more than just herself. The trunk of her car was filled with blankets, food, and clothing. Behind her came friends she had confided in, people who understood compassion, people she trusted with the secret. The barn, once filled only with quiet survival, slowly transformed. The families inside began to live with dignity instead of fear. The farmer, once weighed down by solitude, now had allies. And the woman, who had once been a stranded traveler, became a bridge between two worlds, the world that turned away, and the one hidden in plain sight. In time, the barn became more than just a shelter. It became a place of second chances, a symbol of what kindness could build even in silence. And whenever the woman visited, she remembered the night she first saw the glow through the cracks and thought it was something to fear. Instead, it was a light one that revealed not darkness, but humanity at its most fragile and most beautiful. The story that began with a broken car ended with a truth that left her speechless. Sometimes the most ordinary places hide the most extraordinary people. And sometimes a single choice to knock on a stranger's door, to step inside a hidden barn, to offer help when no one else will can change the course of many lives forever.